Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Shields of Next Media. We're here in Cannes as part of my special series sponsored by ViewPlanner. I'm here with Janet Balis. She's a CXO advisor, longtime industry veteran. Hey, Janet, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
I didn't mean to say long time as if like...
It's been a long time.
We both have been around for a long time. Yes. So I want to ask you about sort of a macro picture. The ad business right now, if you look at the latest forecast, things look really good. Like the spending is going up, but it's definitely not being applied evenly. Like, there are sectors that are really roaring, and then there's others that are, soft or not growing at the rate they probably would like to. What are you hearing from brands in terms of, they're emphasizing retail media and CTV. They've got a lot of questions. What do CMOs, what's on the top of their mind right now?
Well, I think CMOs are focused on the same things that they've always been focused on, which is they need to drive growth and they need to do it effectively and efficiently. But I think that what they're really focused on is the fact that the definitions that they used before don't really work anymore. And so they're focused on things that are super accountable. They're definitely focused on things that are performance oriented.
Which is like retail media. That's why it's roaring.
Yeah, of course. And retail media is growing because it's something that reflects where people are spending their time. CTV is growing because it's a place where people are spending their time. It's a category that matters. It's measurable, and it's exciting, and it's super connected. I think one of the things though that we have to always look at is the consumer leads and business models follow.
Yeah.
I don't think these are decisions people make in boardrooms just abstracted from human behavior.
Right. When you say the definitions that they used to have don't work, can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, so many of the things that sit inside of the silos of an organization or the way things flow through an agency don't really always make sense based on human behavior.
Yeah.
Paid, owned, earned, for example, and lots of fun acronyms that flow with that. Owned may sit inside of the technology organization, inside of a marketer's team. And then you might look at where the paid flows, and that might be a separate team. And then you take something like retail media. Where does that sit? Shopper marketing, all those things.
It was a very trade-oriented thing.
Totally.
And now it's
trade, promo spend, all those things. Yeah. Where do they sit? They need to all connect. Yeah. They're all accountable, and you don't want to spend the same dollar twice. You want it all to...
keep hearing the same thing with on the video side.
Totally.
Is it social or TV or something else? And that's perhaps inhibiting growth or slowing down decision-making that should be reflecting the way consumers are actually behaving now.
Yeah, you want the dollars to move fluidly with where the human attention is moving and where things are going to actually drive growth.
On that note, one of the things that's come up a lot here, obviously there's a lot of conversation about AI. It seems like there's a lot. If you hear CMOs, they're almost saying if we're going to use this right, we really have to almost blow up the whole org chart, or not get rid of everybody, but just restructure dramatically. And that's not going to be easy. I wonder if you're hearing the same kind of chatter.
100%, and it goes beyond marketing. So if you're actually going to use data and AI intelligently, what you want to do is connect all your data across the commercial agenda, so that you're looking at things like marketing, RGM, supply chain, R&D. Right. You want to connect all those decisions because everything's a variable that can be optimized. And the more you understand about how all those things relate, price, promotion, how you're distributing your product, the more you can make intelligent decisions. So when you really think about it, all of those silos just stand in the way and create friction between you and the future.
Right.
So that's why I think you're hearing that from a lot of those executives, is it starts to really challenge. It's almost like an existential question, like what should the org chart really look like? Because you really want to make, again, those fluid decisions between all of the different choices you have as an organization that can drive value creation.
And if one of the at least early benefits seems to be you're going to get rid of a lot of the grunt work, the process, the repetitive, that's great, but then that means the structure you have now doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, look, that's low-hanging fruit. I think the easy things we can conclude are that things like marketing operations are going to be commoditized. And I also think people are conflating AI and generative AI with automation.
Yes.
There's a lot of automation that people are talking about that isn't necessarily AI, and they do go hand in hand.
Right.
The fact is that a lot of things that today are incredibly difficult will not be in the future. And the things that are
Sounds
easy
good.
should be easy. And the things that really do require human intelligence are going to need much more strategic upstream thinking about what are the goals, how do you design the KPIs, how do you optimize intelligently, and how do you connect the dots between really complicated decisions across silos of the organization to really make sure that you're making the right trade-offs between the short and the long term across the product portfolio and make sure you're driving value creation.
Do you think the thing that no one wants to talk about is does that sounds like fewer people or smaller marketing organizations? Do you think that's where we're headed, or is it just going to be really different?
I think that the people who should be worried are the ones who aren't leaning into AI. I don't think AI necessarily gets rid of people. I think people who aren't appreciating the value of AI probably become less relevant.
Right.
But I don't think it's definitely not a job for job thing or AI for job thing in the same way that automation wasn't. When you look at it, you can't replace the whole human. Now, over time, when you get to the entire operating model shifting, can you run an entire organization with fewer people over the long term? Probably.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the analogy is often, we thought programmatic was going to get rid of salespeople and everything, and then there's a whole industry of people that are built, working ad ops now that never were, things like that.
Yeah, I fear the programmatic analogy only in our industry because programmatic for some was a race to the bottom on price, especially as it was used in so many cases to monetize all the way to the edge. I think this can be a race to value. Because we can understand so many different dimensions and actually use all the variables in play to drive growth.
We mentioned retail media earlier. There's one of the reasons brands love that, besides it's super accountable.
It's also closer to purchase.
Yeah, it's got everything you love,
behavior,
right?
Yeah.
But I wonder if brands are almost going too far, too fast in that, or there's a inclination to compare everything to Amazon, which not every media vehicle can work that way, especially when brands are losing all this signal with cookies and everything else. Like, could we overdo it on performance, I guess is the question I'm asking?
Well, you certainly can overdo it on performance. And I think that brands that have overdone it on performance see that if you are not identifiable and you go fully to the bottom of the funnel, I think you lose a tremendous amount of results. You need to perform throughout the full funnel. And everybody, I think, who is thriving appreciates that. I think the reason people focus on performance is because it is accountable and understandable and because it is the piece that they can most readily explain to their CFO.
Sure. Yeah.
But if people think that the bottom of the funnel is performing without the top of the funnel, then I think that is not the case.
That's the hardest story for the CFO. A couple more questions, Janet. I wonder, when you're here, Ken, you see there's a lot more creators. There's obviously a big presence from the social platforms. Do you think brands have fully gotten their arms around this generational divide between how young people entertain themselves, what they view as the importance of platforms like TikTok, but also of creators versus the traditional TV business? Is that a struggle?
I don't know if it's a struggle. I think some brands have leaned into it and some brands have yet to lean into it. I think when you look at younger generations, they're not defined by a single dimension. They are not defined by certainly their age and their gender and a couple of other simple psychographic characteristics. And the content that they consume reflects that, which is why creators and influencers are so diverse in terms of what they're responding to. And so I think for brands that want to reach Gen Z and Alpha and beyond, we have to really be thoughtful about the influencers that are going to really connect with them, create a human emotional connection. And honestly, again, going back to retail media, why are people spending money there? It's because it's driving a response. When you look at creators and influencers, the other reason it's so powerful is it's driving a response.
Yeah, they're powerful.
When you look at younger generations, they are not making purchases based on past preference and long historical loyalty. They're making purchases in a much more vulnerable way where they're listening to those creators and influencers and they are much more willing to try new things.
Yeah.
So I think that's really exciting for brands, but it's also a point of weakness if you're not playing in the space.
Right. That is a challenge. That's a different kind of challenge. So with all the change or potential change we're talking about, does that reshape the world as we know, where it's agencies, brands, media companies, ad tech, et cetera? Does that dynamic shift over time?
Oh, it has to shift dramatically. And I actually think if I look up and down the closet, one of the most interesting things that's happening here is there's still a lot of people doing transactions. They're selling to each other.
Yep.
And I think that's going to change a tremendous amount. If you think about it, most of the things that can be automated will be automated. And if that's the case...
Do you need all these intermediaries? Do you need all these...
Well, a lot of things are going to get disintermediated. And a lot more capability has been created by media companies, by agencies, and by marketers themselves, which means those algorithms actually need to work together. If those algorithms need to work together, they need to be coordinated as an ecosystem. And the only arbiter of truth is what is the marketer's goal. If that's the case, we need to think much more holistically from their perspective, and we must partner and wire everything together. The tech stack, the marketers, the capabilities, the media companies and the agencies, and it can't be a one-to-one transaction of everything they purchase.
That's really different than the way things have operated for a while.
And that's going to be very different than where we are today.
Big change there. Lastly, we're here at Cannes. What are you been hearing about that is either interesting, exciting, maybe something that tells us about what the rest of the year looks like?
I think the thing that I see here is just a tremendous amount of energy. I think that the AI thing, it's sort of floating underneath the surface here, and I think we have to avoid it becoming buzzword bingo, where we're just using it gratuitously and not really embracing it. I think right now my biggest concern is it's not just about these micro use cases of content creation or operational productivity. We have to think much more holistically, and it goes back to what you were talking about before, which is this transforms the entire industry. It transforms entire sectors, and we have to think much more big picture. The parties here are awesome, but after we reflect and on all of this, there's a lot of very big picture thinking, and I'm not sure the shape of the kinds of people who will be here, 5-10 years from now, will look quite the same. I mean, we can still party here, but I think the shapes of a lot of sectors and industries are going to look quite different because of all the dynamics we've been talking about here.
As long as we can still party.
Oh, we can always party. Right. That's a given.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Janet.
Pleasure.
Awesome conversation.
Great to see you.